Okay, this is video number 8. I want to talk more about life inside a cult. What is life like inside a cult? Is it weird? Well, in some groups, they dress in orange and they shave their heads. There's some weird cults out there, definitely. Heaven's Gate, they all wore the same trainers and they ended their lives after a comet went over. There are some pretty crazy cults out there. You could say Al Qaeda, ISIS. In the news in the UK, there was a young lady that got involved in ISIS and she ended up getting deported. Cults recruit online, cults recruit on the street. You might meet somebody at university or somebody at a school or somebody at a shopping centre or through a friend or through a family or even through a workplace. So cults and the culture of cults is extremely diverse. It's extremely diverse. I was an engineer, got a degree, started working down a shopping centre one day, boom, ended up in a cult for 20 years. And I met a lot of different types of people inside the cult. Some other geeky type people like myself, some more salesy, a few people who'd come off drinking and drugs or stuff like that, people looking for a fresh start, all sorts of people, old, young, black, white, men, women, whatever, all sorts of people could end up in a cult. And it's within the cult that they have a common set of beliefs. They might believe in Jesus. They might believe that their leader is the second coming of Christ. They've got a common set of beliefs. But if you actually look at the people, it is a wide spectrum of people. I could tell lots of stories about different type of people I met in the cult. There was this one guy who was a freeloader. Yeah, I remember coming home from work one day. This would have been in the late 90s, and I got in my house and there's this bloke there, and I thought, oh, who are you and where did you come from? And somebody had let him in. There was two other guys living with me in this house, and somebody had let him. And he said, oh, I'm so and such. And I said, oh, okay, nice to meet you. And he said, oh, the leader said it would be all right if I stopped over at your place. No. Who are you? He was a freeloader, basically. Somebody who just thinks he can scrounge off other people's generosity. He was a bit of a salesy type guy, this guy as well. Friendly, but a freeloader. It's like, what, am I just going to cook you a meal, am I? It's like there are people who look at Christians as a free ride. It's like, oh, this person's going to cook me a meal. This person's going to let me stop over. This person's going to give me a free lift somewhere, And this guy's one of the guys I remember. He didn't last that long in the cult. I think he was there a couple of years, but he was actually somebody who would take from a cult, which is quite rare because usually cults, the leaders usually take from the members. But this guy, I think he went along with the con. I don't know whether he realised it was a con or not, but he thought, oh, maybe I'll get cheap rent, cheap food, or free rent, free food, just a freeloader. Also in the cult, there were some very successful people. I remember there was a guy who worked for a big bank in London. There was another guy who was on a 6-figure salary as a specialised healthcare sort of guy. There was one guy who owned a care home. So in this particular cult, this back in the days when I was in Camberley, there were some very rich people in the cult, and there were also just unemployed people. It was a full spectrum of people. I was working at the time as an engineer, average wage, average person, But yeah, there were rich people driving around in BMWs. There were poor people who you had to go and give them a lift to get them to the church. So yeah, I mean, sometimes people think, oh, they're all the same, these cult members. Their belief system is the issue. But, you could get rich people, poor people, black, white, all sorts, Chinese, Asian, all sorts of people in a cult. It doesn't matter what they look like, it's how they've been programmed or indoctrinated. That's the common theme that you will spot them. There's people out there looking for a group. They might feel a bit lonely. They might, oh, I think I'll join a church then. They seem friendly. I'll join a Christian group. And then they don't realise it, but they end up in a cult. I don't think there's many people who go looking for a cult. There might be one or two. But, it's generally somebody gets recruited by somebody they don't know who's friendly. You think you've had a chance encounter with a really nice person, or it's just caught you at a time of weakness. Oh, I'm a bit bored, I'm a bit lonely. Oh, okay, then I will go to your Bible study. People fall into multi-level marketing as well. Somebody, you see an opportunity online, or you meet somebody and they say, oh, I'm doing this business. Oh, business. Yeah, you can join too. Oh, can I? I mean, I'm unemployed. I've been unemployed since 2007. I had 3 mental breakdowns in the cult. The first one was when they said, oh, sorry, your mum didn't make it. She died. And then they said, oh, it's a shame she didn't make it. And that just pushed me over the edge. I had a mental breakdown. Second mental breakdown, it was just too much pressure they were putting on us to recruit. The third mental breakdown was more of a sort of religious breakdown. I just couldn't make sense of reality. I became delusional, Having a mental breakdown is it's terrible, because your perception of reality just fails, and that could include what you think God is about, or the universe is about, or life is about, or what people are about, or the whole system, and it all falls apart, and it doesn't make sense, and it was a very dark place. And I didn't just have one mental breakdown, I had 3, different aspects. As I said, the first one was when a loved one died, and then they said, oh, it's a shame they didn't make it. And it's like, how can a good God send a good person to hell? It didn't make sense, and I just broke down. I broke down, and they didn't care. They didn't care in the slightest, the cult. It's just, oh, we're not getting money from him anymore then. Or not using him to recruit others. They really are heartless people, cult leaders. They don't give a damn. They really don't. You can see that in the way they behave and the way they treat people. Cults are evil. There's no denying it. And they're also so corrupt. I remember this charity that they asked us to give money to that was run by the cult. 90% of the money just went in the same pockets of the same people who were running the cult. They just had a different job title. Oh, they're working for the charity, but they are not the charity. It's like people on 6-figure wages who were just sponging off of a charity. Hardly any of the money actually went to help poor people. another thing with the cult is, you know, it's like, where does all the money go? Well, you're giving the money and you're doing the recruiting. So where does the money go? Well, they just rake it in. They just rake it in and spend it on themselves. I mean, these cult leaders, they'll travel around the world in luxury, supposedly going from one church conference to the other. Yeah, they can waste money. You know, they'll lie about their wages, because most of their money comes from expenses, not wages. You know, they really are devious devils, these Bible-based cults, and other type of cults as well. So, you know, why do people fall for them? Any number of reasons. I mean, I think one of my vulnerabilities was I was looking for a girlfriend. I wanted to get married. And I thought, well, this is good. I found this church. We go on dates on a Saturday night. I'll be married by the end of the year. And I was really believing that. And if you really believe something and you want something, you can sort of turn a blind eye to the reality of the situation. Or just, well, I don't really hang around the leaders, you know, I'll just hang around the regular members type of thing. So people can get out of a cult a sense of purpose. They can even agree with the cult doctrine, but not actually do it. So a lot of members, and pretty much all the leaders, can preach the cult doctrine and yet be complete hypocrites at the same time. Some people, I mean, I remember in the cult, I was petrified of hell, you know, because I haven't recruited somebody. And somebody else could go to the service and they nod and they agree and they're just going along with it. But they're not, they don't really believe it. It's just a group of friendly people, you know, kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, there's a whole spectrum of people in cults. I mentioned a freeloader. I mentioned rich people, you know. I guess different people just have vulnerabilities. Maybe they're covering up sexual immorality, you know, and it's just like, well, you know, if I join this group, they'll help me overcome my sin, you know, stuff like that. So people can go to these type of cults for any number of reasons, you know, and the more intense the cult, the more sort of hard they are about everybody has to recruit and everybody has to give money and everybody has to believe the leader and say the leader is from God. That is the biggest trick of these cults, is playing the God card. You know, Stephen Hassan calls it undue influence. You know, you think the leader is from God, you obey God because you're obeying the leader, and you don't think to question it. You know, they're extremely devious. You know, that was one of the things that motivated me to help people out of cults for all those years. I don't do that now. I mean, I am doing it indirectly through putting these videos up. But yeah, nasty. Cults, very nasty. There's a book by Rick Alan Ross called Cults Inside Out. It's on his website, culteducation.com. Yeah, I mean, I can tell you my story, but yeah, I mean, I watch some of these videos online, you know, all sorts of, why did you, why is the biggest question. Why didn't you just walk away? Yeah, it's relationships, thinking it's from God, hope. People hope things are going to get better. You know, I think that's a big thing, that people stay in relationships too long because they hope things will get better. But, you know, sometimes things only get worse. But there you go. So that's video 8. Cults are very diverse, even within the group. So with this channel, if you want me to talk about something specific, please leave a comment, and I'll look at your comments